More than 5,000 years ago, a man was frozen high in the Alps, his body preserved in ice like a time capsule waiting to be found. When scientists finally studied him, they discovered incredible secrets hidden in his DNA and belongings. Secrets that told us about his ancestry, his life, and even his mysterious death. This man, later named Ötzi the Iceman, became one of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries in history. It all began on a cool September day in 1991. A German couple, Erika and Helmut Simon, were hiking in the rugged Ötztal Alps on the border between Austria and Italy. The landscape was harsh, with thin mountain air, jagged rocks, and glaciers still clinging to the peaks. But late summer sunlight had softened the ice just enough to uncover something no one expected. As they made their way across the trail, they spotted what looked like the body of a man lying half buried in melting ice. At first, they thought it was a climber who had died recently in the unforgiving mountains. But as they got closer, they noticed something strange. This man wasn't wearing modern clothes or carrying modern equipment. His shoes were made of leather and stuffed with grass for warmth, an ancient but effective trick against the cold. In his hand was a copper axe, the blade stained green with age. Even more surprising was how well his body had been preserved. His skin was darkened and leathery but still intact, and his features were eerily recognizable. The ice had acted like a natural freezer, protecting his body for thousands of years. Authorities were quickly called in, and helicopters brought archaeologists and scientists to the site. What looked at first like a rescue mission quickly turned into one of the greatest scientific investigations of all time. Carbon dating soon revealed the shocking truth. The man wasn't a recent victim of the Alps. He had died over 5,000 years ago, around 3,300 BCE, during the Copper Age, when humans had only just begun working with metal. The researchers named him Ötzi, after the valley where he was found. Ötzi wasn't just a frozen body. He was a window into an ancient world. Every detail, from his clothes and tools to his tattoos and even his last meal, told a story about life thousands of years ago. Scientists soon learned that his death had not been peaceful. He was about 45 years old when he died, considered old for that time, but his body showed he was strong, muscular, and well adapted to the harsh environment. He stood 5 feet 3 inches tall and weighed around 110 pounds, small by today's standards, but clearly built for survival. One of the most fascinating discoveries on his body was a set of 61 tattoos. These weren't decorative designs but carefully placed markings along his joints and lower back, areas where he likely suffered from arthritis and pain. Researchers believe these tattoos may have been part of an early medical treatment, similar to acupuncture, showing that ancient people already had creative ways of easing pain and treating illness. His clothing also revealed incredible skill and resourcefulness. He wore leggings made from goat hide, a bearskin cap for warmth, and a woven grass cloak for extra insulation. Every piece of his outfit was practical, designed to help him survive freezing temperatures, biting winds, and rugged mountain conditions. But the most astonishing objects were the tools he carried. Among them were a finely crafted flint knife, a longbow, and most importantly, a copper axe. At the time, copper was extremely valuable and difficult to make, meaning very few people owned such tools. The axe wasn't just a useful weapon for chopping wood or hunting, it was also a sign of status. Whoever Ötzi was, he wasn't just an ordinary man. His possessions suggested he was someone important, perhaps a leader, warrior, or hunter with access to rare resources. Ötzi the Iceman gave humanity a direct link to the past. Through him, we learn not just about how ancient people survived but also about their intelligence, their creativity, and their struggles. What began as a chance discovery on a mountain trail turned into one of the greatest archaeological finds in history, forever changing what we know about human life 5,000 years ago. The copper axe found with Ötzi suggested that he may have been a person of high importance in his community. But while his belongings showed his status, his body also revealed the tragic story of his final hours. Forensic studies made it clear that his death was not caused by an accident or simply being trapped in freezing conditions. Instead, he had been attacked. On his left hand, there was a deep cut that looked like a defensive wound, as if he had tried to protect himself. His ribs showed signs of bruising and possible fractures, suggesting he had been in a violent struggle. The most shocking clue was discovered in his shoulder, an arrowhead lodged deep inside, piercing through a major artery. This injury alone would have caused him to bleed to death. It wasn't an accident. It was murder. Even more mysterious was the discovery of blood from 4 different individuals on his clothes and equipment. This meant he had not been entirely alone before his death. But were these people his attackers, or were they companions who fought alongside him? The answer remains a mystery. Adding to his troubles, scientists discovered that Ötzi also suffered from a condition called atherosclerosis, which caused his arteries to harden. If he had lived longer, it could have led to a heart attack. The fact that he died high in the mountains suggests he may have been running from someone, or perhaps hunted down during a tribal conflict or a personal dispute. Whatever the reason, his life ended violently, showing us that even 5,000 years ago, humans faced the same dangers of conflict and violence as we do today. The discovery of Ötzi changed history. His body and belongings offered an unmatched glimpse into the life of Copper Age people. Their survival skills, their tools, their health struggles, and even their ways of treating illness. His tattoos, clothing, and weapons revealed resourcefulness, intelligence, and resilience in a harsh world. But his violent death reminded us that human conflict is as old as humanity itself. Years later, scientists wanted to know even more. Who exactly was Ötzi? Where did he come from? Could his DNA reveal secrets of the ancient world? In 2012, researchers managed to extract and map his genome, his complete set of genetic material. At the time, DNA sequencing of such ancient remains was still new and incredibly difficult, so the achievement was groundbreaking. The results were astonishing. Scientists discovered that Ötzi had light skin and brown eyes, something that surprised many because his mummified body looked very different. Even more shocking, his DNA showed signs of steppe ancestry, genetic traces linked to the Indo-European people who would later spread across Europe. But history told us these migrations took place centuries after Ötzi's life. If the findings were correct, they meant that people carrying this ancestry had reached Europe far earlier than anyone believed. This would completely rewrite the timeline of human migration in prehistoric Europe. Overnight, Ötzi was no longer just a frozen man from the Alps. He became a key figure in the story of how ancient populations spread and shaped the world we live in today. Not everyone was ready to accept the first DNA results. Some experts warned that studying ancient DNA came with serious risks. Even the smallest bit of modern genetic material, whether from researchers handling the remains or from the environment, could easily mix with the ancient sample and create results that looked real but were actually misleading. Despite these warnings, the findings from 2012 were widely celebrated. The idea that Ötzi was a genetic bridge between ancient Europeans and Indo-European migrants quickly became part of his story and was repeated for years. But science never stands still. As time went on, the study of ancient DNA advanced at an incredible pace. By 2023, researchers had far better methods and stricter safeguards to make sure their work was accurate. Ancient DNA research was no longer a risky experiment. It had grown into a careful science where every step was monitored to prevent mistakes. That year, a team of top geneticists from the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology and URAC Research decided to revisit Ötzi's DNA, determined to start fresh and uncover the truth with modern tools. This time, instead of testing softer tissues that could easily be contaminated, they took DNA from a dense piece of Ötzi's hip bone. This part of the skeleton was less likely to have been damaged by time or touched by outside sources. Even so, the process was delicate. After more than 5,000 years, his DNA was broken into tiny, fragile fragments. Scientists had to work with extreme precision, taking every precaution to ensure no modern DNA slipped into the sample. When they finally completed the sequencing, the results stunned the world. The steppe ancestry that had caused so much excitement in 2012 had completely disappeared. It had never been there at all. The earlier discovery was revealed to be a mistake. Contamination from modern DNA had fooled researchers into thinking they had found an ancient link that did not exist. This new, uncontaminated genome told a very different story. Ötzi was not the missing genetic bridge between ancient Europeans and Indo-European migrants. His DNA did not shift the timeline of human migration, and he was not the groundbreaking connection many had believed for more than a decade. For researchers who had trusted the 2012 results, this was a hard truth to accept. Entire theories, discussions, and historical models had to be rethought. The correction was not a small detail. It completely overturned what had once been called a major breakthrough. Ötzi's revised DNA profile became a powerful reminder of how science works. Even the most celebrated discoveries must be tested, challenged, and re-examined with the best available methods before they can be trusted. The 2012 genome was an extraordinary achievement for its time, but the technology back then was fragile and vulnerable to error. Excitement had moved faster than caution, and it took new advances in 2023 to set the record straight. Instead of being remembered as a genetic link between distant populations, Ötzi now stood as a symbol of science itself, always changing, always self-correcting, and always searching for the truth through patience and precision. His DNA no longer told the story researchers once believed, but his frozen body still held many secrets, waiting to be uncovered. One of those secrets came not from inside his bones, but from the surface of his skin. For years, the dark lines and dots scattered across his body were dismissed as random marks caused by freezing and preservation. But when scientists examined them under powerful 3D microscopes, they realized these markings were not random at all. They were tattoos, 61 in total, carefully placed in deliberate patterns. What shocked experts was not just that they existed, but where they were located. Many of the strange dark marks on Ötzi's body turned out to be more than tattoos for decoration. When scientists mapped their positions, they discovered something extraordinary. The patterns lined up almost perfectly with acupuncture points that are still recognized in traditional Chinese medicine today, even though Ötzi lived thousands of years before acupuncture was officially recorded. This raised a stunning possibility, that his people had developed their own form of therapeutic body marking, perhaps as a way to relieve pain and treat illness. When the pigments inside the tattoos were studied closely, they revealed another surprise. The ink was not just ordinary soot from fire. It contained tiny particles of burned medicinal plants, including traces of Artemisia and Valeriana. Both of these herbs are known even today for their pain-relieving and anti-inflammatory properties. In other words, his tattoos were not only symbols, they were medicine embedded into his skin. What made this discovery even more mysterious was that some of these plants did not naturally grow in the Alpine region where Ötzi died. This meant he either traveled great distances himself or was part of a trade network that stretched far beyond his mountain home. His people clearly valued healing knowledge, and they were willing to exchange rare resources to obtain it. The placement of the tattoos revealed clues about his health. Lines along his lower back and knees suggested that he suffered from chronic joint pain, possibly arthritis, which would not be surprising for someone living in harsh, physical conditions. Small clusters of marks near his ankles hinted that he may have been treated for injuries caused by years of hiking, climbing, and hunting in the mountains. In many ways, Ötzi's skin acted like a medical diary, recording the pain he carried and the remedies he used to fight it. Some researchers now believe that Ötzi may have sought out a healer, someone in his community who understood both herbal medicine and the therapeutic use of body markings. This points to a society that valued advanced medical practices long before such knowledge was thought to exist. Far from being just a frozen hunter, Ötzi became evidence of an ancient medical tradition that was both innovative and surprisingly effective. His tattoos told us something profound. Humans have always searched for ways to ease suffering and improve health. 4 centuries after his discovery, people thought they knew who Ötzi was. Museums and documentaries showed him as a light-skinned man with brown eyes and thick hair, walking alone through icy mountains. This image was based on the best evidence available at the time and fit neatly into the story of Europe's past. People accepted it without question, until 2023, when everything changed. With the help of the most advanced DNA technology, scientists uncovered a genetic story that was far more surprising than anyone expected. Instead of being a fair-skinned wanderer, Ötzi's ancestry revealed something much deeper about the history of Europe. Over 92% of his DNA came from Neolithic Anatolian farmers, people who had left the region we now call Turkey nearly 8,000 years ago and brought farming into Europe. These early farmers carried seeds, domesticated animals, and new tools that forever changed human life, replacing nomadic hunting with permanent villages and agriculture. The other 8% of Ötzi's ancestry came from Europe's older hunter-gatherer groups, the people who lived on the continent long before farming arrived. This mix revealed something striking. While much of Europe experienced wave after wave of new migrations and blending of populations, Ötzi's ancestors stayed isolated for centuries. They did not fully mix with the later groups who shaped modern Europeans. This isolation meant that Ötzi did not belong to the main ancestral line that continues strongly into Europe today. Instead, he represented a nearly lost branch of humanity. His DNA carried the signature of the first Anatolian farmers, a lineage that was eventually erased by later migrations and only survives in a few pockets. Strangely, one of the strongest connections to this ancient bloodline exists not in the Alps, where his body was found, but far away on the Mediterranean island of Sardinia. The people of Sardinia are known for their unique genetic history, and Ötzi's closest living relatives are found there. This discovery connected a frozen man from the Alps to an island community hundreds of miles away, showing how complex and surprising the story of human migration truly is. Because the people of Sardinia lived on an island separated from the rest of Europe, their population stayed fairly isolated for thousands of years. Unlike mainland Europeans, who mixed with many waves of new arrivals, Sardinians avoided much of that genetic blending. This gave them a rare connection to the same Neolithic farming populations that made up most of Ötzi's ancestry. In a way, while Ötzi's genetic branch disappeared almost everywhere else, a part of it quietly survived in Sardinia. This discovery completely changed how historians and scientists understood his place in history. Instead of being a direct ancestor of modern Europeans, Ötzi turned out to be part of a branch of humanity that nearly went extinct, a dead end, in genetic terms. His DNA was like a time capsule, freezing the story of a people who once thrived but were later almost erased by migration and mixing. But this wasn't the only surprise his DNA carried. The same study that revealed his ancestry also overturned everything people thought he looked like. For decades, museum displays and documentaries showed him as a man with pale skin, light eyes, and thick brown hair. These reconstructions weren't random guesses. They were based on the scientific evidence available at the time. But modern technology proved them wrong. The latest DNA analysis and new forensic methods revealed that Ötzi's skin was much darker than expected, darker even than many southern Europeans today. His eyes were brown, not blue. And far from having a full head of hair, he was balding, not because of thousands of years in the ice, but because his genes carried the markers for early hair loss. This was more than a cosmetic change. It forced a direct challenge to long-held assumptions about Europe's past. Many people had grown used to seeing Ötzi as a fair-skinned man because it fit the image they expected of ancient Europeans. Discovering he had dark skin and brown eyes unsettled that picture. It reminded us that ancient Europe was far more diverse in both appearance and ancestry than we often imagine. The earlier reconstructions were not lies, but they reflected cultural expectations as much as scientific data. People, perhaps unconsciously, created an image of the past that felt familiar and comfortable. The new 2023 findings shattered that comfort, replacing it with a version of history that was more complex, less predictable, and far more fascinating. Seeing the real Ötzi meant understanding that history is not a straight path from ancient times to today. Some lineages, like his, flourished for a while and then disappeared. Others survived only in unexpected places, like Sardinia. It also revealed a deeper truth about science itself. Science is not here to protect the stories we like to believe. It is here to reveal reality, even if that reality is uncomfortable or challenges our assumptions. For more than a decade, people thought they knew what Ötzi looked like. But the truth showed how much we still had to learn. Instead of being a familiar figure from the distant past, Ötzi became a powerful reminder of how human history is full of twists, migrations, and surprises. His dark skin, brown eyes, and balding head were not small details. They were essential to understanding who he really was. His ancestry showed us a world already in motion, where people were mixing and changing long before recorded history. But while his ancestry explained his roots, his body told another story, the story of his struggles and health at the time of his death. Ötzi's remains were not just a scientific artifact but the fragile remains of a living man. His DNA carried signs of diseases that we often think of as modern problems. He was genetically predisposed to heart disease, type 2 diabetes, arthritis, lactose intolerance, and even obesity. These conditions, written deep into his genetic code, showed that such illnesses have been part of human life for far longer than we once believed. The physical evidence matched the genetic clues. His body showed signs of ulcers and gallstones. He carried parasites in his intestines and suffered from Lyme disease, making him the oldest known human ever found with this infection. His blood showed traces of pathogens, and his joints showed painful wear from arthritis. By the time of his death, Ötzi was not the unstoppable mountain hunter many once imagined. He was a man burdened by pain, struggling to move through life in a weakening body. His tattoos added yet another layer to this picture. They were not decorations but carefully placed marks that matched points used in acupuncture. Scientists now believe they were an early form of pain therapy, made using charred medicinal herbs that reduced inflammation. In other words, Ötzi was trying to treat his suffering with the medical knowledge of his time. It is a deeply human image, a man thousands of years ago searching for ways to ease his pain, just as we do today. The more we learn about him, the more he becomes a reminder that ancient life was not simple or idyllic. It was harsh, unpredictable, and full of the same vulnerabilities we face today. Ötzi's frozen body reveals not only the hardships of one man, but also the resilience and ingenuity of humanity. Yet, despite all these insights, one of the biggest mysteries still remained. What exactly caused Ötzi's death? Scientists were amazed when they studied Ötzi's DNA. Unlike most ancient Europeans, whose genes showed a history of mixing with many different groups, his genetic line seemed unusually pure and unchanged. This was strange in a continent shaped by thousands of years of migration and blending. Why did Ötzi's DNA stand apart? The answer was found in his environment. Ötzi belonged to a small, isolated community that lived high in the mountains. The steep valleys, harsh weather, and cultural boundaries acted like natural walls, keeping his people separate from outsiders. While other areas of Europe saw farmers, hunter-gatherers, and steppe herders mixing together, his community remained on its own.